If you've ever wondered what peaceful living looks like, you don't have to search very far. You just have to drift back to the 19th century, follow the sound of slow waves brushing against the rocks, and stop at a lonely lighthouse standing tall on the edge of the sea. That's where our story begins. And don't worry, there's no rushing here. No traffic, no email notifications, no neighbors playing loud music at midnight. Just calm air, soft water, and a single person whose daily life moved at the speed of a gentle breeze. This is the world of the lighthouse keeper. Now, before we follow him through his day, let's just breathe for a moment and settle into the space he calls home. Picture a quiet coastline, maybe a small island, maybe a rocky point of land sticking out like nature's elbow. The sky usually hangs low and soft. The wind doesn't shout, it mostly whispers. And the lighthouse itself stands tall like someone who has seen too much but refuses to panic. Solid stone, white paint, a glass room at the top. It's not a fancy place, but it's steady, and steady is good. Back in the 1800s, lighthouses were like life-saving nightlights for sailors. Imagine storms, heavy waves, and ships trying to find their way in the dark with nothing but stars and hope. Then imagine one bright beam sweeping across the sea saying, "Hey friend, land is over here, don't crash into it." The keeper's job was to make sure that friendly beam stayed alive every single night. Not a big job for drama, but a huge job for safety. And our keeper, well, he wasn't famous. His name didn't make it into history books, but he was steady, reliable, and gentle. The kind of person you trust to water your plants, feed your dog, and return your tools on time. He lived in a small cottage right next to the lighthouse. A simple place with wooden floors, a stove that took forever to heat up, and windows that always rattled a little when the wind changed its mood. But it was home. Inside, his furniture was sturdy and slightly suspicious looking, as if each piece had survived at least one adventure at sea. The table was uneven, the chair creaked like it was trying to sing, and the bed wasn't soft, but it didn't need to be. When you spend your days climbing stairs, polishing glass, and battling dust, you sleep just fine on anything. The keeper's mornings began before sunrise, not because he was a morning person, but because lighthouse work doesn't care about your personal sleep preferences. In this world, nature sets the schedule, and the keeper follows it the way a quiet student follows a strict but kind teacher. Before the sun even peeked over the horizon, the waves were already awake, tapping gently at the rocks like someone knocking softly on a door. Gulls made slow circles in the air, calling out to each other like old friends catching up. The sky changed colors inch by inch, from deep gray to soft blue, with streaks of pink and gold quietly appearing. Nothing rushed. Everything moved in slow motion. And inside the cottage, our keeper stretched under his blanket and let out the kind of morning sigh that comes from someone who is equal parts sleepy and peaceful. He didn't jump out of bed like people in motivational videos. Instead, he sat up slowly, rubbed his eyes, and stared at his boots for a few seconds, as if asking them, "Do we really have to do this today?" But of course, the answer was always yes. The light must shine, no matter what his boots think. He would wash his face with cold water that woke him up faster than any cup of coffee could. Then he'd light a small fire in the stove, listening to the crackle as flames stretched out like someone waking from a long nap. The smell of burning wood filled the room, a warm, earthy scent that felt like a hug. While the water warmed up for tea, he'd step outside for a moment. The early morning air wasn't harsh, it was cool, a little salty, and clean. The kind of air that makes you feel like you just opened the window in your mind and let fresh thoughts float in. The lighthouse tower stood right there beside him, tall and quiet, waiting for its morning care. And beyond that tower lay the endless sea, moving, breathing, alive. Standing there, the keeper never felt lonely. It might surprise you, but solitude isn't the same as loneliness. Some people fear quiet, but others find peace in it. For our keeper, this silence was a companion. The sea was always talking, even if softly. The wind had different moods. The birds had their little gossip sessions. And then there was the lighthouse itself, solid, dependable. like an old friend who didn't say much but always listened. After taking in the peaceful morning, the keeper would return inside to make a simple meal. Bread from yesterday, a bit of butter if he wasn't out of it, or porridge that he stirred patiently while the stove hummed. He wasn't trying to win any cooking awards. He just needed enough energy to get through a day filled with climbing, cleaning, polishing, and more climbing. As he ate, he looked around his tiny home. The walls held small reminders of life before solitude, maybe a faded picture, maybe a letter from family, or maybe a little wooden carving he made during a windy evening when he didn't feel like reading. Each small detail carried a story, but none of them were rushed. They just existed, quietly, like everything else around him. And so, his day began, not in drama or loud commands, but with calm steps and gentle routines. The lighthouse wasn't just a job, it was a promise to ships miles away, a promise to sailors who would never know his name, a promise to keep the light steady, sure, and shining through fog, rain, or long, quiet nights. In this chapter, we simply meet him. We meet his world. We take our time. We let the waves breathe. And as the sun rises slowly over the sea, the keeper prepares for the long, soft tasks ahead. Tasks that aren't glamorous, but are full of purpose and quiet beauty. And with that, the day officially begins.
Dawn at the lighthouse is a gentle kind of magic. It doesn't shout. It creeps, little by little, like a cat stretching across the windowsill. The sky slowly lightens, clouds turn soft shades of pink and orange, and the sea starts to shimmer, as if rubbing its eyes awake. For the 19th century lighthouse keeper, this was the time of quiet beginnings, the slow unfolding of a day that would be calm, steady, and filled with small but important tasks. Our keeper usually rose just before the first hint of light because the lighthouse doesn't wait for anyone. Its duty is to shine, and it relies on a person who can be trusted to care for it. He sat up in bed, yawned, stretched his arms like a lazy branch reaching for sunlight, and listened. The wind was soft, and the waves lapped against the rocks rhythmically. There were gulls circling far above, calling out to each other in gentle, sleepy voices. Even the smallest sounds seemed to have a melody here. He started the day slowly, in the way that makes mornings feel like a warm cup of tea rather than a loud alarm clock. He washed his face with cold water from a basin, the shock of it making him wake fully. Then he padded over to the small stove, lit a fire, and listened to the wood crackle, sending little puffs of warm smoke curling into the air. The stove was old, like everything else in the lighthouse cottage, and it had a character all its own. Sometimes it hissed and groaned in protest before warming up, as if reminding the keeper that it was not going to be rushed. The keeper simply smiled, stirred his tea, and waited. Patience, after all, was part of his daily rhythm. Breakfast was quiet. Usually porridge, sometimes bread with a bit of butter or cheese, sometimes salted fish if the provisions were plentiful. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, and often glanced out the window at the sea. The horizon slowly brightened, and the first rays of sunlight scattered across the waves, glinting like a scattering of tiny jewels. There was a soft joy in simply watching the world wake up, even if no one else was there to see it. The keeper found company in the elements, the wind, the waves, the gulls, the tower itself. By the time he had finished breakfast, the lighthouse called him. The day's first task was often an inspection. He wrapped a woolen scarf around his neck, slipped on boots that had been worn soft by years of walking up and down the spiral staircase, and opened the cottage door. The air outside was crisp, carrying the smell of salt, wet stone, and wood smoke. A quiet fog sometimes lingered, softening the edges of the rocks and muting the sound of the waves. It made the world feel a little like a painting, blurred at the edges, perfect in its calmness. Climbing the tower stairs was like a slow meditation.
Each step creaked underfoot, echoing softly in the hollow stone. The keeper didn't rush. There was no need. Each step was deliberate, each handhold considered. At the top, he would pause to look out over the sea. Early morning light made the waves silver, and the horizon seemed endless. The world felt enormous, yet completely peaceful. He checked the lens in the lantern room, making sure everything was clean, intact, and ready for the coming night. There was a sense of quiet responsibility here, a gentle duty that didn't weigh heavily, but demanded attention nonetheless. After the inspection, the keeper would take a moment to breathe and stretch. Perhaps he'd tap a finger on the brass fittings of the lens, feeling the cool, smooth metal under his skin. Where he might just stand quietly, watching the fog drift along the rocks below. In these moments, he wasn't just maintaining the lighthouse, he was listening to it. The tower and the sea were partners in his daily life, speaking to him in the way that only someone who has lived in quiet solitude can understand. Once the inspection was complete, the keeper often had chores that required careful attention. Cleaning the lens, polishing the brass, checking the gears, and making sure the wick in the lamp was trimmed perfectly. It might sound repetitive, and it was, but repetition in the lighthouse had a soothing rhythm. Each action was deliberate, precise, and oddly comforting. There was a kind of quiet satisfaction in seeing the lens sparkle under the morning light, knowing that tonight it would send a steady beam across the water. A ship could trust it, sailors could rely on it, and he could take a small, quiet pride in that. By the time the sun had fully brightened the day, the keeper was immersed in his world. He might tidy the cottage, sweep the floors, or stack firewood for the evening. Each task, no matter how small, carried a rhythm. And rhythm, in the quiet isolation of a lighthouse, became a kind of comfort. Time moved gently here, without urgency, without hurry, without stress. The day unfolded like a soft song, each action a note in a melody only he could fully hear. And so dawn passed, unhurried and serene. The lighthouse stood firm, the sea shimmered, and the keeper moved quietly through his morning rituals. Life in the 19th century on a lonely coastline wasn't glamorous or exciting, but it had a beauty all its own. The sun rose slowly, the waves whispered against the rocks, and a single beam of light waited patiently to shine when night returned. And our keeper, calm, steady, and quietly content, continued his gentle routine, step by step, task by task, in the slow, peaceful rhythm of life by the sea. After dawn had fully painted the sky with soft colors, and the sea had begun to sparkle under the morning sun, our lighthouse keeper started the day's real work. The day's work wasn't rushed, noisy, or dramatic. It was careful, deliberate, and quietly essential. And the first part of this work, one of the most important, was the inspection of the lighthouse itself. He began at the base of the tower, boots crunching softly on gravel and small rocks. The lighthouse looked calm in the morning light, solid and unshakable. But even the strongest tower can be affected by the sea and wind. Stones can crack, paint can peel, metal can rust. The keeper's eyes were trained to notice even the tiniest imperfection, the smallest change from the day before. And unlike someone in a hurry, he didn't just glance, he looked, really looked. Step by step, he walked around the tower, inspecting the walls, the windows, the railing. A crack in the mortar here, a chipped piece of paint there. Nothing dramatic, nothing urgent, but everything mattered. Each tiny detail, if ignored, could become a problem. And in a lighthouse, small problems could be dangerous. One overlooked leak in the lens room could let water in. One rusty hinge on the door could make the lantern hard to access when night fell. And the sea, of course, never stops. It keeps moving, keeps testing the strength of the land and the structure built upon it. The keeper, patient and steady, matched that movement with his calm attention. After inspecting the exterior, he would start his slow climb up the spiral staircase. The stairs, narrow and steep, had been worn smooth by years of boots, but each step still creaked softly. The keeper liked the sound. It was familiar, a quiet rhythm that matched the steady pulse of life in the lighthouse. He paused occasionally, leaning on the railing, breathing in the salt-tinged air that drifted in through small windows. Sometimes, just for a moment, he would close his eyes and listen. The waves rolling, the wind brushing against the glass, a gull calling far above. Even these pauses were part of the work, a meditation hidden within routine. Reaching the lantern room, he began the inspection of the lamp and lens. The Fresnel lens, with its elegant layers of glass, was the crown jewel of the lighthouse. It was delicate, precise, and magical in its function. The lens focused the lamp's light into a beam that could reach miles across the water, guiding ships safely to shore. But the lens required care. Dust or oil or a stray drop of water could scatter the light or dull its brilliance. And so the keeper moved carefully, touching each panel with a soft cloth, turning the glass gently, making sure it was spotless. It was slow, repetitive work, but it had its own quiet satisfaction. There was a little humor, too. Sometimes he joked to himself about how he felt more like a window cleaner than a heroic light bringer. And yet he knew every sweep of the cloth mattered. Next came the mechanical inspection. The lamp rotated, powered by weights and gears that had to be wound and balanced just so. The keeper checked each gear, oiled the moving parts, made sure nothing squeaked too loudly. There was a rhythm here, almost like music, winding, listening, adjusting. He could tell by the sound if a gear needed attention. The lamp was an orchestra, and he was both conductor and caretaker. If one part was off, the whole performance could falter. But when everything worked as it should, the rotation was smooth, the light steady, and the beam would sweep across the water as if nothing could touch it. And that was the goal, quiet perfection in motion. After the lamp and gears, he checked the wick. Whale oil or kerosene, depending on the season and supplies, fed the lamp. The wick had to be trimmed just so. Too long, and the flame smoked. Too short, and the light was weak. He trimmed it carefully, testing it with a small match. Watching the flame jump to life was always satisfying. A steady flame meant the lighthouse would do its job tonight. A good flame was a promise kept. And if the flame flickered, he'd adjust, trim, and light it again, patiently, until it shone bright and steady. Once the lantern room was completely checked, he would pause to look out at the sea. Boats, far away, might already be beginning their day. Waves glittered and danced under the morning sun. Sometimes he'd spot a bird skimming the surface, catching a fish. He allowed himself a small smile, appreciating that life went on, safely and calmly. All his work, checking stones, stairs, lens, gears, and flame, was for moments like this, for the quiet security of knowing that the light would be ready when it was needed, when darkness returned. He also kept a logbook, a simple leather-bound notebook where he recorded observations, weather conditions, the state of the lamp, small repairs done. Each entry was a small proof of care, a note that the lighthouse was tended. Over time, the logbook became a quiet companion, a story of routine, diligence, and responsibility. Sometimes he added tiny sketches of clouds or birds, little doodles that made him smile. It was work, yes, but it was also a quiet joy, a conversation with the day, the lighthouse, and the sea. Even though morning inspections were serious, there was room for humor. Perhaps a stubborn gear refused to turn or a rope slipped loose at the wrong moment. He might mutter a small exclamation under his breath or tap it lightly, as if scolding it gently. The lighthouse, he liked to think, had a personality. It could be temperamental, moody, or a little stubborn, but it was always loyal. And loyalty in a solitary place like this was a kind of friendship. By the time the morning inspection was complete, the lighthouse was clean, steady, and ready. Every gear was checked, every panel wiped, every note logged. And the keeper could take a moment to rest, perhaps sip some tea, and enjoy the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The tower gleamed softly in the morning sun, the lens sparkled, the walls, doors, and stairs stood solid and prepared. And the keeper, tired but calm, smiled, knowing that the light would shine tonight just as it had every night. Morning inspections weren't glamorous, exciting, or celebrated, but they were essential. Each careful motion, each patient check, each gentle adjustment contributed to the safety of people far away. And in the quiet rhythm of the lighthouse, there was beauty, there was peace, and there was a little bit of humor tucked into the repetitive gestures, the small victories, and the steady, unchanging presence of stone, metal, and light. The morning, slow and deliberate, was complete. The day's rhythm had been set, and as our keeper moved down the spiral stairs, boots echoing softly against worn stone, he carried with him the quiet satisfaction of knowing that his lighthouse, like him, was ready for whatever the sea might send next.
At the heart of every lighthouse, perched high above the swirling waves, sits the lens. Not just any lens, but a Fresnel lens in the 19th century, a marvel of glass, brass, and careful craftsmanship. And for the lighthouse keeper, polishing this lens was both duty and ritual, a quiet ceremony that started his day with intention, patience, and sometimes a little bit of silliness. The lens room was always cool and slightly damp in the early morning. Tiny drops of condensation would cling to the glass after a night of fog, reminding the keeper that even the mightiest structures are touched by the elements. He climbed the spiral stairs slowly, carrying his cleaning cloths and oil in a small, well-worn box. Every step creaked underfoot, but today the sound was comforting. It was the familiar music of routine, a rhythm he had known for years. When he arrived at the top, he paused, taking in the view through the glass walls. The horizon stretched endlessly, painted with soft shades of pink and gold by the rising sun. Waves rolled gently, and a few gulls traced lazy circles in the sky. The world looked almost too beautiful, too peaceful to interrupt with work, but work it was, and the lens demanded attention. Polishing the lens was not a task for someone in a hurry. It required patience, focus, and a steady hand. The keeper began with a soft cloth, dipping it into a mixture of oil and water, and then carefully wiping each curved panel of glass. He moved slowly, almost ceremonially, circling the lens from top to bottom. The glass reflected the morning light, scattering tiny prisms of color across the walls. For a moment, it seemed as if the lighthouse itself was quietly celebrating the dawn. This task was repetitive, yes, but in repetition there was a rhythm. Wipe, breathe, wipe again. Each motion became almost meditative. The keeper often found himself thinking small, wandering thoughts. Maybe he wondered if a gull was jealous of the sparkle from the lens. Maybe he imagined what a sailor far away would feel, seeing the first beam of light pierce the night. Sometimes, when he paused to rest his hands, he would tap the brass frame gently and mutter, "Good job, old friend. You'll shine tonight." Humor was subtle here, a small smile, a quiet joke to himself, but it kept the long hours light and gentle. The Fresnel lens was a work of delicate engineering. Layers of curved glass bent and focused light into a far-reaching beam, capable of warning ships miles away of danger. The keeper respected this. He handled each panel with care, mindful that even the smallest smudge could scatter the light. And he did it not because anyone would applaud him, but because it mattered. Each polished surface was a promise to sailors, a promise to the sea, a promise to the lighthouse itself.
Sometimes the polishing involved more than just cloth and oil. The brass fittings around the lens had to be cleaned too, gently wiped and polished until they gleamed like gold. The keeper enjoyed this part almost as much as cleaning the glass. There was a satisfaction in seeing the metal shine, a quiet pride in knowing that the lighthouse, from top to bottom, was well cared for. The gears that turned the lens would later hum softly as the lamp rotated, and the polished brass would catch the light, sending gentle reflections across the walls. It was a small show, silent and private, just for him and the early morning. While working, he sometimes hummed softly, a tune that had no name, just a rhythm that matched his motions. Wipe, hum, wipe again. The hum was unimportant, but it made the room feel warmer, less solitary. And sometimes, when the wind rattled the windows or a gull tapped at the glass, he would chuckle quietly. Polishing the lens was serious work, yes, but it was also playful. The lighthouse and its keeper had a small, private companionship, one that thrived in patience, careful attention, and gentle jokes. Hours passed slowly. The sun climbed higher, scattering more light through the room. The lens, once dull with morning condensation and dust, now sparkled, every curved panel perfectly clear. The brass gleamed. The lens rotated smoothly on its gears when the keeper gave it a test turn. It was ready, and in that readiness there was peace. The lighthouse could now perform its purpose, guiding sailors safely through darkness and fog. And the keeper? He could finally step back, stretch his arms, and admire his work without feeling rushed. There was satisfaction in that moment, a quiet, glowing pride that warmed even the chilly morning air. The polishing ritual wasn't just about the lighthouse. It was also about the keeper himself. Repetition, careful attention, and rhythm became a form of meditation. Each motion grounded him, connected him to the space, to the sea, and to the steady pulse of daily life. In those quiet moments, he could think without distraction, watch without rushing, and exist without hurry. And sometimes, when a particularly persistent smudge refused to vanish, he would smile, mutter a small complaint, and try again. Humor was part of the ritual, subtle but present, a reminder that even serious work could be lightened by patience and a gentle laugh. By mid-morning, the lens shone brightly in the sunlight, ready for the night ahead. The lighthouse stood proud, its heart polished and prepared. The keeper wiped his hands, shook out his cloths, and carried them back down the spiral stairs. Each step sounded familiar and comforting, the echo of routine as satisfying as the work itself. He paused briefly at the bottom, looking up at the tower, feeling a quiet connection to the structure he cared for so diligently. The lighthouse was not just stone and glass, it was a living presence, and the lens, the heart of its light, was ready to shine, thanks to patient hands and gentle care. And so the morning continued with tasks and duties flowing naturally from one to the next. Polishing the lens was complete, but the day held more quiet work ahead. Repairs, checking the lamp, tending the small garden, noting the weather, all were part of a slow, deliberate rhythm that marked life as a lighthouse keeper. Each task was small, essential, and filled with its own quiet beauty. The lens was clean, the brass gleamed, and the tower awaited the sun's full rise. And for the keeper, the satisfaction of a job well done was as steady and calming as the sea itself. By the time he finished polishing, he could sit for a brief moment with a cup of tea or just listen to the wind against the tower. And in that moment, he allowed himself to feel something rare and precious, complete, quiet contentment. The lens sparkled, the brass reflected the light, and the lighthouse, sturdy and patient, was ready to perform its purpose. Life here was simple, slow and deliberate. It was not glamorous,
It was not hurried, but it was full of purpose, rhythm, and a gentle, steady beauty that could calm even the busiest of minds. And with that, the keeper prepared for the next stage of his day, carefully tending the lamp, checking the fuel, and ensuring that the heart of the lighthouse would shine steadily when night returned.
After the lens sparkled in the morning sunlight, the next step in the keeper's gentle routine was tending to the lamp itself. The lamp was the heartbeat of the lighthouse, and caring for it required patience, care, and a soft touch. In the 19th century, lamps were powered by whale oil and later kerosene, which meant the keeper had to handle the fuel carefully, trim the wick perfectly, and make sure the flame would burn steadily through the long, dark night. The keeper began by carrying his small, well-worn tools and a clean cloth up the spiral stairs. Each step creaked, as usual, the familiar sound comforting in its repetition. The lamp stood in the center of the lantern room, tall and polished, surrounded by the freshly cleaned Fresnel lens. It looked almost proud, gleaming in the morning light, as if it already knew it would shine brightly tonight. The keeper smiled quietly and muttered, "Let's make you proud of yourself." The first task was checking the oil reservoir. Whale oil had a strong, slightly fishy smell, but the keeper had long grown accustomed to it. Handling it required care. Spilling even a small amount could create a mess, and overfilling could be dangerous. He poured the oil slowly, watching the golden liquid settle in the reservoir, almost like a calm sea in a tiny glass container. There was a little humor here, too. The keeper sometimes joked to himself that the lamp drank better than he ever did, and that it would be polite to sip slowly. He tipped the reservoir slightly, listening to the soft slosh of the oil, and nodded in approval. Next came the wick. Trimming it was an art, a delicate task that required precision. Too long, and the flame would smoke and blacken the lens. Too short, and the light would be weak. The keeper held the wick between his fingers, examining it with a careful eye. Then, with a small pair of scissors, he trimmed it just enough. He tested it with a tiny flame, watching how it danced and settled. A steady flame meant the lighthouse would guide sailors safely. A wobbly flame meant more adjustments. Each adjustment was done slowly, deliberately, with gentle hands. And if the flame flickered more than he liked, he would sigh softly and whisper, "Come on now, behave," as if the lamp could hear him. Cleaning the lamp itself was next. Brass fittings needed polishing, glass panels needed wiping. Dust and tiny particles from the previous night's wind could settle in the nooks and crannies. The keeper worked patiently, wiping each piece of brass until it gleamed, running a soft cloth over the glass, watching as the morning sunlight reflected on every surface. There was a rhythm here: polish, wipe, inspect, repeat. He sometimes hummed a soft tune to keep the rhythm flowing, the melody matching the slow, meditative motions of his hands. This wasn't work meant to be finished in a rush. It was care, it was attention, it was love for a lamp that had a very serious job to do. Once the wick was trimmed, the oil topped up, and the lamp polished, the keeper performed a test. He lit a small flame, watching carefully how it grew, stabilized, and reflected in the lens. The room filled with a gentle warmth and soft golden light. He adjusted the wick slightly, just to perfect it. Even the tiniest flicker could cause him to pause, examine, and readjust. And yet, he did it all with patience and a faint smile, enjoying the slow process. There was something soothing about making sure a small flame could cut through the darkest night miles away. The lamp was more than just a tool. It was a companion. The keeper had long grown used to talking to it quietly, sharing thoughts and small jokes, and listening to the gentle hum of the oil and gears. He understood the lamp in a way only someone who spends hours polishing, adjusting, and observing it can. And in those quiet interactions, he found rhythm, comfort, and even amusement. The lamp had moods, he liked to think. Sometimes it flickered stubbornly. Sometimes it burned steady as a loyal friend. And the keeper, always patient, learned to understand both. After the lamp was fully prepared, the keeper moved on to checking spare supplies. Extra oil, wicks, and cleaning cloths were stored neatly nearby. He inspected each container, ensuring nothing had spilled or deteriorated. Supplies were essential, and organization mattered in a place where the sea often kept visitors far away. He sometimes chuckled at how seriously he treated these simple bottles and cloths, as if they were precious jewels rather than everyday necessities. But in truth, they were precious. They were the tools that allow the lighthouse to fulfill its promise. The final step in maintaining the lamp and fuel system was a slow, careful test of the rotation mechanism. He wound the gears slightly, listening to the soft hum and observing the smooth turn of the lamp. The Fresnel lens reflected the light perfectly, sending tiny prisms dancing across the walls. The keeper nodded in quiet satisfaction. Everything worked as it should. The lamp was ready. The light was ready. The lighthouse was ready. By mid-morning, the lamp and lens were in perfect harmony. The tower gleamed, the brass shone, and the wick stood tall and obedient. The keeper leaned back slightly, rubbing his hands together, and allowed himself a small moment of pride. His work might not have been recognized by many, but it mattered. Sailors miles away would rely on the steady beam tonight. That small golden flame would guide them safely. And in the calm certainty of his routine, the keeper felt the quiet joy of purpose. Even in the simplicity of these tasks, there was humor and lightness. Sometimes the wick refused to behave. Sometimes oil spilled despite his best care. And sometimes a gust of wind rattled the windows in a way that made him jump slightly before chuckling. These little moments, though minor, made the solitude warmer, more human. The lighthouse wasn't just stone, glass, and oil. It was a living rhythm, a quiet dance of light, and the keeper was both its guardian and companion. Once the lamp was fully ready, the keeper stepped back and looked around the lantern room. The lens sparkled, the brass reflected the early sun, and the small flame flickered steadily. The lighthouse was prepared for whatever night might bring, storm, fog, or clear skies. And the keeper, calm and patient, continued his day, moving naturally to the next quiet tasks, tending the logbook, checking the weather, and keeping the tower in perfect order. Maintaining the lamp and fuel system wasn't glamorous or fast-paced. It didn't involve dramatic heroics or thrilling rescues, but in its quiet, repetitive precision, there was beauty, there was rhythm, there was the satisfaction of knowing that a single flame could light the way for many. And in this rhythm, the keeper found calm, purpose, and even a small, gentle joy that made every careful motion worthwhile. And so, with the lamp ready to shine, the golden oil settled, and the wick obedient and steady, the lighthouse stood proud and patient, waiting for the night. The keeper wiped his hands, smiled softly at the polished brass, and prepared to continue the slow, deliberate rhythm of his day. Life in the lighthouse was quiet, gentle, and full of purpose. A lesson in patience, care, and the quiet power of a single steady light.
After tending to the lamp and polishing the great lens, our lighthouse keeper often allowed himself a slow, peaceful breakfast. The morning sun had fully painted the sky with soft colors, and the air was crisp with the scent of salt, seaweed, and the gentle warmth of the cottage fire. Breakfast wasn't rushed. It wasn't a performance. It was a quiet ritual. A moment to gather energy, and, most importantly, a time to watch the world awake along with him. The keeper's kitchen was simple. A small wooden table, a sturdy chair that creaked with every movement, and a little stove that had long learned how to behave in response to his careful hands. There were no fancy gadgets, no timers, no complicated recipes. There was porridge in a simple pot,
bread, sometimes from the small flour stock he kept, and salted fish if he was lucky enough to have caught some or received it from a visiting supply boat. Butter or cheese, if there was any left, made small appearances, but mostly breakfast was plain and wholesome. And for the keeper, plain was perfect. It was reliable, nourishing, and matched the rhythm of his quiet life. He set the table slowly, placing each item just so. A small cup for tea, a knife for spreading butter, a spoon for the porridge. Even the act of arranging these items was meditative. It grounded him, reminding him that he existed in this calm, steady place, and that everything he needed was within reach. He might hum softly, a tune with no words, just a rhythm that matched the soft ticking of the clock and the distant lap of waves against the rocks. Breakfast itself was an exercise in slow enjoyment. He would stir the porridge gently, watching the steam rise in delicate curls, smelling the warmth and simplicity of the meal. Sometimes a gull would call loudly from a nearby rock, as if offering commentary on his cooking skills. "Not impressed today, eh?" he'd whisper, smiling. The humor was small, tucked into these solitary moments, but it made the day lighter and the silence less lonely. As he ate, the keeper often looked out the window. The sea was calm in the morning, rolling gently toward the shore, each wave catching the sunlight like tiny mirrors. Occasionally a boat might appear far off, tiny against the vastness of water and sky. Sometimes seals poked their heads out of the water, curiously watching the slow figure in the lighthouse. Birds circled gracefully, calling to each other in sleepy, drawn-out conversations. Everything moved at a gentle pace, nothing hurried, nothing sharp. Breakfast was as much about nourishment for the body as it was for the mind and spirit. He sometimes carried his cup of tea outside, standing for a few moments on the stone path leading to the tower. The wind was cool but friendly, ruffling his hair and tugging gently at his coat. He breathed deeply, letting the salty air fill his lungs. The smell of sea, stone, and distant wood fires blended into a scent that could make even the heaviest thoughts feel lighter. It was a moment of quiet connection with the world, solitary but not lonely. The sea, the birds, the lighthouse itself, even the occasional boat far away, were companions in his calm morning. After a few minutes, he would return to the cottage to finish breakfast, cleaning his small utensils and putting leftover food away carefully. He was methodical, but not rigid. The gentle repetition of clearing the table, wiping the stove, and washing the dishes became part of a rhythm that marked the morning. Each action, though small, carried a quiet satisfaction, the kind that only comes from doing things well, with patience and care. Sometimes he would talk softly to himself, or to a pet if he had one, a cat, a dog, or even a particularly nosy gull that lingered near the window. "Better be careful today," he'd whisper. "Don't spill anything on the floor. We wouldn't want that." Humor in the lighthouse was subtle, tucked into small moments of life, small observations, and the gentle absurdity of talking to animals or objects as if they were old friends. It made the morning lighter, warmer, more human. The landscape beyond the cottage provided a calming backdrop for breakfast. Rocks smoothed by centuries of waves, patches of grass bending in the wind, distant cliffs rising out of the water, all were painted with the soft hues of early sunlight. The keeper liked to watch shadows move slowly across these surfaces, noticing tiny changes that would be invisible to most people rushing through the day. A driftwood log here, a shell there, a flock of birds passing overhead. Each small detail mattered. It was a gentle lesson in mindfulness, a reminder that life, even on a quiet island, was rich with movement and beauty. Once breakfast was finished, the keeper washed his small dishes, dried them carefully, and returned them to their neat storage spots. Then came the brief pause before the next set of tasks. Checking the weather, inspecting the tower again, tending to small repairs, and ensuring everything was ready for the day ahead. But this pause was important. It was a moment to reflect, to let the warmth of food and tea spread through his body, and to carry the calm of morning into the work that would follow. Breakfast by the sea for the keeper was more than just a meal. It was a ritual of presence. It grounded him in the moment. It connected him to the lighthouse, the land, and the endless, gentle pulse of the ocean. And in this quiet, deliberate routine, there was a small happiness that didn't need applause or recognition. It was private, gentle, and persistent, a quiet companion to the long hours of the lighthouse keeper's day. Even humor had its place in these moments. Perhaps a bird would snatch crumb from the table, or a wayward gust of wind would rattle the window just so. He might laugh softly, shaking his head, and continue sipping tea or eating porridge. The world didn't demand seriousness here. It demanded care, presence, and attention. And the keeper, steady and patient, gave all three in abundance. By the time breakfast was over, the morning had moved forward just a little bit. The sun climbed higher, warming the cottage and the lighthouse walls. The sea sparkled in gentle waves. Birds flitted between rocks and sky. And the keeper, nourished, amused, and fully awake, prepared for the next stage of the day, observing the weather, tending the logbook, and caring for the tower. Breakfast had done more than fill his stomach. It had set the tone for a day of calm, careful work in harmony with the world around him. And so, with the scent of salt in the air, the warmth of porridge in his belly, and a small smile on his face, the lighthouse keeper arose from the table. The world was waking slowly, steadily, peacefully, just as he always liked it. And he moved forward into the rhythm of his day, carrying with him the gentle joy of a simple breakfast by the sea.
After a simple breakfast by the sea, the lighthouse keeper's attention shifted to one of the quieter, yet crucial parts of his day, observing the weather and recording his notes in the logbook. At first glance, it might seem like a slow, even trivial task, but in the 19th century, these observations were essential. Sailors far away depended on the lighthouse not only for light at night, but for insight into the conditions of the sea and sky. And for the keeper, this task was an exercise in patience, mindfulness, and quiet appreciation of the world around him. The keeper stepped outside, the morning sun warming his back as he walked along the stone path around the lighthouse. The wind brushed gently against his face, carrying the salty scent of the ocean. The waves rolled steadily, each one a soft rhythm that seemed to set the pace for his observations. He stood still for a moment, taking it all in. The color of the sky, the shape of the clouds, the direction of the wind, every detail mattered. And he observed them slowly, carefully, with the attention of someone who knew that even the smallest changes could be significant. He carried a small notebook, its leather cover worn smooth from years of handling, and a quill with ink carefully kept in a tiny glass bottle. His notebook was his companion, his record of life in the lighthouse. Every day, he wrote down weather conditions, wind speed, direction, cloud formations, temperature, and anything unusual he noticed. Sometimes he added tiny sketches, a bird perched on a rock, a ripple in the waves, the curve of a distant cliff. These little drawings were not art, exactly, but a form of observation, a quiet meditation on the world around him. The process of writing was slow and deliberate. He would kneel on a small stool, careful not to smudge the ink, and write in neat, patient script. The words were simple, almost minimalist, but each entry held importance. Over time, the logbook became a map of the seasons, a record of storms and clear days, of foggy mornings and sparkling afternoons. It was both practical and poetic, a reminder that life in the lighthouse was measured not in hours and minutes, but in careful attention to the rhythm of nature. Sometimes the keeper would pause mid-sentence to look up at the sky. Clouds shifted lazily, the wind whispered through the tower, and the gulls called to each other as if commenting on his work. He would smile quietly, perhaps muttering a small observation. "Looks like fog's rolling in, better be ready tonight." Or, "The wind's playful today, moving east again." Humor, subtle as ever, crept into these moments, softening the solitude and keeping his mind light. Recording the weather was not just about observation, it was also about interpretation. A sudden change in wind direction could signal an approaching storm. The thickness of morning fog might hint at a damp day ahead. Even the behavior of the sea offered clues. Waves slapping softly against the rocks, or rolling higher than usual, carried information. The keeper learned to read these signs with patience and care, as if the world were speaking in its own gentle language, and he listened. His logbook entries became almost ritualistic. Each day he followed the same steps: note the time, describe the sky, measure the wind, sketch the scene, record any unusual events. Sometimes he added tiny sketches: a bird perched on a rock, a ripple in the waves, the curve of a distant cliff. These little drawings were not art exactly, but a form of observation, a quiet meditation on the world around him. Occasionally, a small gust of wind would scatter loose pages or ruffle the notebook, and the keeper would chuckle softly as he caught them. "You're mischievous today," he'd whisper to the wind, carefully replacing the sheets and holding the notebook firmly in his lap. Even in these minor interruptions, he found humor and patience. The lighthouse demanded vigilance, but it also encouraged quiet playfulness, a reminder that even serious tasks could carry moments of joy. As he wrote, he noticed subtle changes in the environment. Perhaps a cloud had deepened to a stormy gray, or the sun's reflection on the water had shifted. The keeper paused to adjust his notes, capturing these fleeting details with careful attention. Each observation, no matter how small, added to a larger understanding of the sea, the sky, and the world surrounding the lighthouse. In this sense, his work was both practical and meditative, a blend of science and quiet contemplation. By late morning, the logbook was filled with careful notes, sketches, and observations. The keeper closed the leather cover gently, smoothing his hands over it, and looked up at the lighthouse tower. The day was progressing, slow and steady, just as it always did. The lamp and lens are prepared, breakfast had been nourishing, and now the weather had been observed, logged, and interpreted. Everything was in its proper place. The keeper often took a final moment to look at the horizon, letting his gaze wander over the gentle waves and distant cliffs. The sea was calm now, the wind steady, and the birds continued their lazy circles above. He felt a small satisfaction in knowing that his logbook would help sailors safely, even though they would never see the neat pages filled with careful writing. The work mattered, even if it went unnoticed, and in this there was a quiet pride, gentle and steadfast. Even humor found its place in the logbook ritual. Perhaps a gull landed too close, peering curiously at the pages, or a playful wave splashed near the base of the tower. He would laugh softly, record the event in his notes, and continue writing. Life at the lighthouse was solitary, but never dull. Every observation, every small challenge, and every gentle interruption added texture to his day, reminding him that even quiet work could be lively in its own way. By the time the keeper set the logbook aside,
The morning had moved steadily toward midday. The sun climbed higher, warming the lighthouse walls and the stone path outside. The waves continued their gentle rhythm, and the wind carried the scent of salt and earth. The keeper, calm and content, prepared to move on to the next stage of his day, tending the garden, checking small repairs, and ensuring that every part of the lighthouse remained in perfect order. The rhythm of routine, patient observation, and quiet care continued, as it always had. And so, with the logbook closed and the morning observations complete, the lighthouse keeper moved through the day with gentle purpose, connected to both the lighthouse and the wider world. Each recorded note, each careful observation, each small sketch in the leather-bound book became part of the ongoing story of life on the coast, quiet, steady, and full of patient, gentle beauty.
After completing his morning observations and logging the weather, the lighthouse keeper often turned his attention to the quieter, more tactile parts of his day, tending to the small garden around the cottage and performing minor repairs in and around the tower. These tasks were not urgent, dramatic, or glamorous. Instead, they were deliberate, soothing, and deeply satisfying. Moments where patience met purpose in the slow rhythm of life by the sea. The garden was modest, a few rows of hardy vegetables, herbs, and flowers that clung stubbornly to life in the rocky soil. Each plant required care, attention, and patience, much like the lighthouse itself. The keeper liked to start with the herbs, parsley, thyme, and rosemary, small green clusters that gave the air a gentle fragrance when brushed. He would crouch down, inspecting each leaf, removing any weeds, and occasionally talking to them softly. "Grow strong today, little ones," he'd murmur, half serious, half amused. Humor was a companion in every part of his day, even in the solitude of gardening. Watering the plants was a slow, meditative ritual. He carried a small metal watering can, its spout long and narrow, allowing him to pour gently at the roots without splashing soil everywhere. The sun glinted off the water droplets as they landed on leaves, creating tiny rainbows in miniature. Each plant, each leaf, responded to the care with subtle signs of life, a slight lifting of a leaf, a soft glint in the sunlight. The keeper watched carefully, almost reverently, understanding that life here was fragile, beautiful, and slow-growing, just like him in many ways. The garden also offered little moments of surprise. A snail gliding along a stone, a bird pecking curiously at the soil, or a stray seed taking root in an unexpected spot. These small occurrences brought a quiet amusement. The keeper would chuckle softly, adjusting his path to avoid stepping on a newly sprouted plant, or pausing to admire a flower that had bloomed overnight. Gardening was not about speed. It was about attention, care, and quiet observation. And in these moments he found deep, calming satisfaction. Once the garden was tended, he moved on to small repairs around the lighthouse and cottage. Nothing dramatic, no broken beams or collapsing walls, mostly tightening hinges, oiling door locks, smoothing rough spots on wooden stairs, and checking the ropes and pulleys that ran the lantern's mechanism. Each task required slow, careful attention. Even a tiny error could have repercussions later, so he worked deliberately, testing each hinge, listening to the creak of each floorboard, and adjusting where needed. Repair work had its own rhythm, much like polishing the lens or trimming the lamp's wick.
Wipe, tighten, test. Adjust, check, repeat. The lighthouse seemed to respond to his care, standing taller and steadier after each small intervention. Sometimes he muttered under his breath when a stubborn screw resisted, or when a rope refused to coil neatly. "You'll behave eventually," he'd whisper, as if negotiating with the tools themselves. And sometimes, after a brief struggle, a small triumph. Hinge tightened, rope coiled perfectly, earned a soft chuckle or a nod of satisfaction. The combination of gardening and minor repairs grounded the keeper in his environment. Each small action connected him to the land, the sea, and the lighthouse. Pulling weeds, smoothing stones, tightening screws, every movement was deliberate, measured, and mindful. Life in the lighthouse was quiet, but it was also hands-on. There was no room for hurry, and every small success, every tiny improvement offered a sense of accomplishment that was steady and enduring. The garden also provided sustenance, both literal and metaphorical. Fresh herbs for tea, small vegetables for meals, and even the flowers for a simple touch of color indoors. The keeper often paused to pick a sprig of rosemary or thyme, inhaling the fragrance, imagining it enhancing his simple breakfast or dinner later. These small pleasures reminded him that life, even in solitude, offered richness. It didn't need extravagance, just attention, care, and a willingness to notice small beauties. Repair work, too, offered unexpected satisfaction. A squeaky hinge silenced with a drop of oil, a rough patch of wood smoothed and polished, a loose stone in the walkway secured properly, all gave the keeper a quiet sense of control over his environment. In a world dominated by the unpredictable sea and weather, these small certainties were precious. Each repair, no matter how minor, strengthened the lighthouse, its surroundings, and the keeper's connection to the space he tended so carefully. By late morning, both the garden and the lighthouse were tended with patience and care. The plants stood taller, the soil damp and nourished, and the tools rested neatly in their places. The lighthouse, sturdy and patient, seemed to hum with quiet approval. The keeper, with slightly soiled hands and a contented heart, took a moment to pause and look around. The sea sparkled gently in the sunlight, gulls called lazily overhead, and the wind carried the scent of salt, earth, and herbs. Life, slow and deliberate, continued with gentle rhythm. Even in these quiet chores, humor remained the soft companion. A particularly stubborn weed might earn a muttered complaint, a playful sigh, or a chuckle. A bird that wandered too close could be gently shooed away with a grin. The lighthouse keeper's day was full of small challenges, small victories, and a persistent sense of calm. Every movement, every gesture was deliberate. Every small success, whether in the garden or in repairs, reinforced the slow, steady rhythm of life by the sea. Once the garden was tended, repairs done, and tools neatly put away, the keeper looked out over the coast and breathed deeply. Life in the lighthouse moved at a deliberate pace. Each task, no matter how small, part of the steady, ongoing rhythm. And with a quiet smile, he prepared for the next part of the day, carrying the satisfaction of careful work and the gentle joy of simple, meaningful routine.
After a morning spent polishing lenses, tending the lamp, observing the weather, and caring for the garden, the lighthouse keeper allowed himself a rare and quiet indulgence, a slow, deliberate midday rest. This wasn't napping for laziness. It was a pause to breathe, reflect, and gently let the body and mind recover before continuing the steady rhythm of the day. In the 19th century, when life was dictated by light, weather, and the sea, these moments of pause were precious, almost sacred. The keeper often chose a quiet spot near a window in the cottage, or sometimes a wooden chair on the small porch outside. From here, he could watch the waves roll endlessly, each crest catching the sunlight like tiny mirrors, each trough deep and calming. The wind carried salt and the faint smell of seaweed, occasionally stirring his hair and the pages of a small notebook he sometimes carried along. Here, he could let thoughts drift slowly, like the clouds overhead, without the urgency of tasks or ticking of the clock. He might lean back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment, listening to the soft rhythm of the sea. The lighthouse tower loomed quietly behind him, steady and patient, as if offering silent company. He often hummed softly, a tune without words, a simple melody that matched the gentle roll of waves. This hum was more than habit. It was a tiny ritual, a comforting thread connecting him to the quiet rhythm of the day. Reflection, during these moments, was unhurried. Sometimes he thought of the previous night, when the lamp had shone brightly through fog or storms, casting its reassuring beam far across the water. Perhaps a ship had adjusted its course because of the light, moving safely through treacherous waters. The keeper imagined sailors, tired and vigilant, glancing toward the distant lighthouse and feeling the comfort of guidance. These thoughts, quiet and distant, filled him with a gentle pride. His work mattered, even when unseen. Other times he reflected on the land and sea itself. He noticed the way sunlight hit the rocks, how the waves lapped against the shore, or how gulls wheeled lazily overhead. Even small changes, the shift of a cloud, a subtle wind gust, or the glimmer of a fish beneath the waves became worthy of attention. His life in the lighthouse demanded patience and observation, and these moments of reflection allowed him to integrate his observations, forming a slow, thoughtful understanding of the world around him. Sometimes he took out his notebook, jotting small notes or sketches of the coastline, clouds, or birds. These weren't formal records like his weather log, but private thoughts captured on paper. Tiny details, observations, or musings. Perhaps a particularly clever gull had stolen a crumb from breakfast, or a wave had splashed in a surprising pattern on the rocks below. Humor, gentle and soft, was never far from these moments. He'd smile or chuckle quietly, noting the small absurdities that punctuated otherwise quiet days. The midday rest also allowed the keeper to connect with simpler pleasures. He might sip a cup of tea, feeling the warmth spread through his hands and chest. The aroma of tea leaves mingled with the scent of salt air drifting in through open windows, creating a comforting, meditative atmosphere. He sometimes nibbled on a small piece of bread or cheese, simple sustenance that reminded him of home and self-care. Eating, drinking, and resting became a meditation in motion, a slow ritual of grounding in the midst of a structured day. During these pauses, he also practiced mindfulness in subtle ways, feeling the cool breeze on his skin, hearing distant waves and gulls, noticing the warm sun or the slight chill in the shade. These sensations kept him rooted in the present moment. Even when thoughts wandered toward the past or future, he returned to the rhythm of the sea and the gentle movements of the world around him. In these quiet interludes, the lighthouse itself seemed to join him in calm observation, standing steadfast while he rested. The keeper sometimes allowed himself brief imagination, pondering faraway lands or the lives of sailors who depended on the lighthouse. He thought of distant harbors, unfamiliar coasts, and ships carrying unknown stories. There was comfort in imagining these lives intersecting, however briefly, with his own solitary routine. And humor again slipped into these thoughts. He might imagine a sailor tipping his hat toward the lighthouse in silent gratitude, or a gull acting as an unwitting messenger, delivering news of distant waters with squawks and flaps. Resting also provided energy for the afternoon's tasks. Though it might seem idle, this pause was essential. The lighthouse demanded steady attention, especially as night approached. Small repairs might be needed. The lamp would require careful tending, and the logbook would need to be updated. By sitting quietly, sipping tea, observing the world, and reflecting gently, the keeper prepared his mind and body for continued work. It was an act of care, not just for himself, but for the lighthouse and those who relied on its light. Occasionally, he would doze lightly, lulled by the soft rhythm of the sea and the warmth of the sun. These naps were brief, gentle, and restorative. Unlike the hurried sleep of a busy town, this rest was slow, intentional, and aligned with the natural rhythm of life on the coast. He would awaken refreshed, noticing small changes, a shift in cloud formation, or the soft hiss of waves against rocks, or the distant glimmer of sunlight on water. Each tiny detail became part of the continuing observation of his world. By the time the midday rest ended, the keeper felt calm, collected, and connected. He had observed, reflected, and allowed his body to recover. The lighthouse tower remained steady behind him, the lens gleaming in sunlight, and the lamp prepared for evening. The garden had been tended, the repairs completed, and the logbook filled. And he, patient and gentle, moved forward into the next part of his day with renewed energy, quiet humor, and the slow satisfaction of a life lived deliberately. The midday rest was a reminder that in the lighthouse, as in life, moments of pause were just as important as moments of action. They allowed observation, reflection, and gentle connection to the world. They made work more meaningful, playfulness more visible, and life more balanced. And for the keeper, these quiet, sunlit hours became a cherished part of the rhythm of the day, an anchor of calm in a life defined by steady attention, careful work, and the ever-present motion of sea and sky.
As the midday rest came to an end and the sun climbed higher in the sky, the lighthouse keeper rose from his quiet reflection with renewed energy. The afternoon, though less dramatic than a stormy night or a foggy morning, held its own set of essential tasks. This was the time for maintenance, careful inspection, and preparation for the evening, moments that required patience, attention, and a calm rhythm that matched the gentle pulse of the surrounding sea. The keeper began with a slow walk around the tower and cottage, inspecting the structure. The stone walls were solid, but even the sturdiest masonry needed attention. Small cracks, loose stones, or worn mortar were noted for repair, and any minor issues were addressed immediately. He carried a small toolkit, simple and well-used, containing hammers, chisels, and other necessities. Each tool had its place, and each was treated with care, as if it were a trusted companion. A well-maintained tool ensured the keeper could handle any minor repair quickly and efficiently. Doors and windows were next on the list. He checked the hinges, ensuring they were oiled and turned smoothly. A creaky door was given a drop of oil, a loose latch tightened, and any draft noted for future attention. Even the smallest squeak or wobble mattered, because every detail contributed to the overall stability and comfort of the lighthouse. Sometimes, a particularly stubborn hinge or latch earned a quiet sigh and a soft chuckle. "You're testing my patience today, aren't you?" Humor, subtle and gentle, threaded its way through every task,
keeping the day light even when the work required focus. The keeper then turned his attention to the tower's stairwell. The spiral stairs, polished by years of careful use, were inspected for cracks, chips, or loose steps. A loose tread might be sanded or secured, a rough patch of stone smoothed with a file. Each repair, no matter how minor, added to the safety and comfort of daily life in the lighthouse. There was satisfaction in this work, physical, tangible, and quietly reassuring. The lighthouse seemed to respond to this care, standing just a little taller, a little prouder as he moved through the tower with calm, measured steps. Ropes and pulleys used for the lantern were checked carefully. Even the most delicate mechanisms could suffer from wear and tear, and the keeper approached them with deliberate attention. He tested each rope, adjusted its tension, and made sure the pulley wheels turned smoothly. The rotation of the lens depended on these systems, and nothing could be left to chance. He often paused to listen to the soft hum of the machinery, nodding in approval when it moved as it should. "Good work, old friends," he would murmur, patting the ropes gently. Humor and companionship, in small doses, kept these solitary tasks warm and human. After inspecting and maintaining the structure and mechanisms, the keeper focused on preparation for evening. The lamp would soon need more attentive care as dusk approached, and he made sure the oil reservoir was topped up and the spare wick ready. Tools were organized neatly, the logbook updated with any new observations, and the small garden around the tower tidied once more. Each task was completed deliberately, with care, as if the entire lighthouse depended on these small, steady hands, which, in truth, it did. Afternoon also offered the opportunity for small, thoughtful enhancements to comfort and order. Perhaps a chair was repositioned near the window to catch the best light, or a small pot of tea was prepared for later. The keeper might sweep the floors, brush dust from ledges, or arrange books and supplies neatly on shelves. These actions, though minor, added to the sense of calm and order within the tower. The lighthouse was not only a structure of stone and glass, it was a living, breathing space shaped by routine, care, and quiet intention. During these tasks, the keeper allowed himself moments of pause to observe the world outside. Waves rolled steadily, gulls circled lazily, and clouds drifted slowly across the horizon. Occasionally, a small sailboat or distant ship appeared, reminding him of the purpose of his work. Each beam of light, each careful adjustment, and each note in the logbook contributed to the safety of sailors far away. Reflection and observation, even in the midst of practical maintenance, remained a gentle, guiding rhythm. Small humor continued to color these afternoon routines. Perhaps a rope twisted unexpectedly, or a stubborn screw refused to cooperate. The keeper would sigh softly, mutter a gentle complaint, and then proceed with a quiet grin. Even the solitary tasks carried subtle playfulness, whether in talking to the machinery, chuckling at a wayward bird, or noting amusing details in his logbook. The day, though structured and purposeful, retained a softness that kept both mind and spirit steady. By late afternoon, the main preparations were complete. The tower was secure, the stairwell safe, the ropes and pulleys in perfect order, and the lamp ready for the evening. The lighthouse seemed to exhale quietly, standing patient and proud, prepared to carry its light across the darkening sea. And the keeper, calm and satisfied, paused to enjoy the subtle, steady rhythm of his work. The satisfaction of a day progressing smoothly, with every task attended to, was quiet but profound, a gentle joy that only those who live in rhythm with the lighthouse could understand. The afternoon also held small opportunities for observation and appreciation. Perhaps a wave splashed unusually high against the rocks, or a flock of birds moved in a peculiar pattern. The keeper noted these details in his mind, sometimes sketching them in a spare notebook. Even the smallest observation mattered, because in the lighthouse, attentiveness was as important as action. Each detail, whether structural or environmental, contributed to a complete understanding of life by the sea. And so, the afternoon concluded with quiet readiness. The lighthouse, meticulously maintained, awaited the approaching evening. The lamp and lens were prepared, tools stored neatly, and logbook updated. The keeper, patient, deliberate, and gently amused by the small events of the day, could now pause briefly before the evening tasks began. His work was steady, rhythmic, and deeply satisfying, a combination of practical care and quiet mindfulness that defined life in the lighthouse. As the sun began its slow descent, casting golden light over the water and rocks, the keeper allowed himself one final glance at the tower and surrounding coastline. Everything was in order. The lighthouse was ready. And he, calm and content, carried the steady satisfaction of the day into the evening, prepared to guide the light and continue the quiet, gentle rhythm that had defined his life for years.
As the afternoon light softened and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, the lighthouse keeper prepared for one of the most important parts of his day, evening preparations and lighting the lamp. The tower, which had stood patient and silent throughout the day, was about to come alive with its vital glow, guiding sailors safely through the night. For the keeper, this routine was both a practical duty and a deeply calming ritual, full of small, deliberate movements and quiet satisfaction. The first step was checking the lamp itself. Even though it had been polished and tested in the morning, the evening demanded a careful second inspection. He climbed the spiral stairs with the familiar creak underfoot, carrying a soft cloth, a small toolkit, and a sense of quiet purpose. The Fresnel lens gleamed in the fading sunlight, reflecting golden patterns across the walls of the lantern room. The keeper smiled softly, as if greeting an old friend. "Time to shine, my little light," he whispered, brushing a finger across the smooth glass. Next came the fuel. Oil, carefully measured and stored, was poured gently into the reservoir. The keeper moved slowly, making sure not a drop was spilled. The soft golden liquid caught the remaining sunlight, glinting like a tiny pool of molten amber. He often muttered small, humorous comments during this step. "Drink up, little flame, big night ahead." These moments of gentle humor, though quiet, lightened the solitary task, making it feel less like duty and more like companionship. The wick required careful attention. Trimming it just right ensured a steady, bright flame. Too long, and it would smoke. Too short, and the light would falter. The keeper handled it delicately, examining the tip, trimming with practiced hands, and testing it briefly. Each adjustment was deliberate, a small act of patience and care. He sometimes imagined the flame as a stubborn student, needing gentle guidance, and chuckled softly at the thought. The act of preparing the lamp was as much about mindfulness as it was about utility, a meditation in gold and flame. Polishing the brass fittings and cleaning the glass panes was the next step. The Fresnel lens with its concentric rings required special attention. Dust or fingerprints could diminish its brilliance, so each surface was treated with care. The keeper moved slowly, methodically, his fingers tracing the smooth curves of the lens and fittings. The warm, fading sunlight highlighted the brass, making it glow softly. There was satisfaction in this task, a quiet pride in seeing every surface gleam in readiness for the night ahead. Once the lamp was fully prepared, the keeper checked the rotation mechanism. The gears and pulleys needed to move smoothly, allowing the lens to turn at just the right pace. He wound the gears slightly, listening to the soft hum and observing the gentle rotation. It was a slow, rhythmic motion, almost hypnotic. He nodded in quiet approval. Everything worked in harmony: the lamp, the lens, and the keeper, all synchronized in preparation for the coming darkness. The keeper then inspected spare supplies. Extra wicks, oil, cleaning cloths, and small tools were arranged neatly nearby. Everything had its place, and every item mattered. He sometimes smiled at the thought that he was more organized than many people he knew, but in the lighthouse, this order was essential. Even a small oversight could mean a flickering flame or a late adjustment, and he took his role seriously, though gently and with a light touch of humor.
Lighting the lamp was the culmination of these careful preparations. The keeper held the match, feeling the tiny spark flicker, and brought it carefully to the trimmed wick. The flame caught quickly, steady and obedient, casting a warm golden glow that reflected through the Fresnel lens. The room brightened softly, sending ribbons of light outward, cutting through the growing darkness beyond the tower. The keeper's lips curved into a quiet smile. There was something magical, even sacred, about seeing the lamp come alive in the twilight, ready to guide sailors miles away. He watched the flame dance briefly, ensuring it burned steadily. The oil flowed smoothly, the wick held firm, and the rotation mechanism hummed quietly in its measured rhythm. The keeper sometimes leaned back, hands resting gently on the railing, and allowed himself a moment to appreciate the culmination of hours of care and preparation. The lighthouse, polished and ready, now stood as a sentinel of light, calm and patient, offering guidance to anyone who might need it in the night. Even as the lamp burned brightly, the keeper remained attentive. He adjusted the wick slightly if needed, wiped any stray smudges from the glass, and ensured the rotation remained smooth. Every movement was slow and deliberate, each adjustment made with care. Humor and companionship continued in small ways. He might whisper to the flame, "Behave tonight, won't you?" or chuckle at the gentle flicker that resembled a tiny dance. In these quiet, solitary moments, the lighthouse felt alive, not just a structure, but a partner in his day, a companion in patience and care. The evening preparations also included a final check of the tower and surroundings. Windows were closed gently, doors secured, and any remaining tools returned to their places. The keeper moved methodically, appreciating the calm order of the space he had maintained. The lighthouse was more than a building. It was a living rhythm, shaped by his attention, care, and deliberate movements throughout the day. Finally, the keeper took a small moment to observe the world outside. The sun dipped lower, painting the horizon in gentle oranges and purples. Waves rolled steadily against the rocks, gulls settled for the night, and distant cliffs caught the last light of day. The lamp's golden beam began to reach far across the sea, a steady presence in the encroaching darkness. The keeper felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. His work mattered, even in ways unseen, and the night was now under his gentle watch. Lighting the lamp, while routine, was also symbolic. It marked the transition from day to night, from preparation to vigilance, from calm to steady alertness. The lighthouse was alive with light, and the keeper, calm and content, had guided this transformation. It was a daily ritual, a slow, meditative dance of flame, brass, and glass, punctuated by subtle humor, gentle reflection, and careful attention. As the evening deepened, the keeper adjusted the lamp's brightness slightly, ensured the rotation remained smooth, and made one last note in his mental log of the day's preparations. The tower, polished and maintained, hummed quietly in the soft breeze. The sea stretched endlessly, waves catching occasional starlight as dusk turned toward night. The keeper, patient and gentle, settled into the rhythm of the lighthouse, ready to maintain vigilance and ensure that its steady glow reached every sailor who needed it. Lighting the lamp, while just a routine, was more than just a task. It was a meditation in motion, a quiet performance of care and attention. It required patience, calm, and gentle humor. And in this deliberate ritual, the lighthouse and its keeper existed in perfect harmony, one providing light, the other providing guidance, together offering safety, rhythm, and a small, profound sense of calm to the world beyond the shore.
With the lamp now burning steadily and the evening sky deepening into shades of navy and indigo, the lighthouse keepers settled into the nightly watch, a time both solitary and profoundly calming. Night at the lighthouse was different from the day. The colors had softened, the air felt cooler, and the world outside the tower seemed slower, quieter, and more mysterious. For the keeper, these hours were a gentle blend of vigilance, observation, and meditation, where the pulse of the sea and the rhythm of the waves became his companions. He moved through the tower with careful steps, adjusting the lamp slightly if needed, checking the rotation mechanism, and ensuring the lens continued to cast its golden beam far across the waters. Every task was deliberate, slow, and precise, requiring attention, but never hurry. The keeper often whispered small comments to himself, a habit that lightened the solitude. "All steady tonight," or "Wave patterns look gentle. Good for the sailors." Humor, soft and subtle, was a constant companion, easing the quiet loneliness of night. Observing the sea became the heart of his watch. From the lantern room he could see waves rolling endlessly, reflecting the golden light of the lamp and darkening gradually with the night. The water moved in gentle, hypnotic rhythms, curling and breaking along the shoreline in patterns both predictable and surprising. Occasionally a ripple or splash caught his eye, a seal surfacing briefly, a fish jumping, or distant lights of a ship glimmering on the horizon. These small details, noted in his mind or occasionally jotted down in a spare notebook, were part of the keeper's meditative attention. The sky offered its own quiet wonders. Stars appeared one by one, delicate pinpricks of light against the deep indigo canvas. Clouds drifted lazily, sometimes hiding or revealing constellations, and the moon's glow reflected off the water in soft, shimmering paths. The keeper loved to observe these celestial movements, finding calm in their steady, predictable patterns. Even the occasional shooting star elicited a soft murmur of delight. "Noted and admired," he'd whisper, smiling quietly to himself. The wind, too, played a subtle part in the nightly watch. Sometimes a gentle breeze ruffled his coat, carrying the scent of salt and distant seaweed. Other times it strengthened, tugging at the lighthouse doors and whistling softly through cracks and crevices. The keeper listened attentively, interpreting the wind's voice. A sudden change might hint at weather shifts, while a steady gust promised calm sailing for those far away. His ears became attuned to the smallest sounds, the whisper of water against rocks, the rustle of ropes, or the distant cry of gulls returning to roost. Patience was essential during this watch. There were long stretches when nothing unusual occurred, when the sea rolled steadily and the sky remained quiet. Yet these moments were never boring. They offered space for reflection, contemplation, and gentle humor. The keeper often let his mind wander, thinking about past days, future plans, or the lives of sailors he would never meet. Sometimes he whispered to the lamp, to the ropes, or to a passing gull, "All quiet so far. Thank you for your cooperation." These small, playful remarks kept the long hours gentle and human. During his watch, the keeper also made small checks of the lantern room. Dust on the lens was wiped away, the wick's flame adjusted as needed, and the oil reservoir topped if necessary. Every movement was slow, deliberate, and careful, blending practicality with a meditative rhythm. Even repetitive tasks like winding the rotation mechanism or polishing brass became almost hypnotic in their steadiness, offering a sense of calm control over the otherwise vast and unpredictable sea. Nighttime offered unexpected companions in subtle forms. A passing gull might call, echoing across the water. Seals sometimes surfaced, their dark eyes reflecting the lamp's glow. Occasionally, distant ship lights flickered like tiny lanterns on the horizon. Each small detail became part of a quiet conversation with the world, a dialogue in observation, patience, and gentle humor. The keeper's solitude was not lonely. It was filled with attentive appreciation of life unfolding in small, measured rhythms. Occasionally, storms would loom in the distance, clouds thickening and winds shifting. Even these moments, while requiring vigilance, were approached calmly. The keeper would check the lamp, ensure the rotation mechanism worked perfectly, and monitor the horizon. There was no rush, no panic, just careful observation, slow movements, and preparation. Humor might appear even here. "Well, you're feeling dramatic tonight, aren't you?" A whispered jest at the moodiness of the sea. During these quiet hours, the keeper often reflected on his own routines, finding joy in the rhythm of repetition. Breakfast, midday rest, garden care, repairs, evening preparations all led to this moment of quiet vigilance. The night watch was the culmination of a day's careful work, an opportunity to see the lighthouse in action and connect with the subtle, steady pulse of the sea. Each observation, each adjustment, each moment of gentle attention reinforced his bond with the lighthouse and the world beyond its walls. By late evening, the world settled into a rhythm of soft darkness and steady light. The lamp's golden beam cut across the water with unwavering focus. Waves rolled predictably, and the wind hummed softly through the tower. The keeper, calm and alert, continued his watch, finding satisfaction in the constancy and quiet purpose of the night. This time, though solitary, was full of small joys, the play of moonlight on waves, the pattern of stars above, and the gentle rhythm of his own slow, deliberate movements. The nightly watch also encouraged reflection on the interconnectedness of all these routines. Each task of the day, polishing, tending, observing, fed into the light's steady presence at night. The lighthouse and keeper existed in harmony, one supporting the other, both providing safety, reassurance, and calm. Humor, small observations, and quiet playfulness made the solitude bearable and even enjoyable, turning what might seem lonely into a peaceful, meditative companionship with the world. As the night deepened, the keeper maintained his vigilance while allowing his mind to drift gently with the rhythm of the sea. Waves, stars, clouds, and wind all contributed to a quiet symphony, a lullaby for both sailor and sentinel. The lamp's glow, unwavering and patient, became a reminder that his steady attention mattered. And in this slow, meditative dance of observation, care, and gentle humor, the keeper found a quiet fulfillment that defined life at the lighthouse.
Even with a steady lamp and calm seas, the lighthouse keeper always knew that nature could turn unpredictable, dramatic, and sometimes dangerous in the blink of an eye. Stormy nights were both a challenge and a sacred part of the routine, a time when his careful attention and gentle vigilance became most essential. But for a 19th-century lighthouse keeper, storms were less about panic and more about deliberate action, patient observation, and quiet endurance. The first signs of an approaching storm often came subtly. Clouds thickened on the horizon, shifting from soft white to rolling gray, then to deep, foreboding slate. The wind, usually a gentle companion, began to tug at doors and windows, carrying with it the tang of heavy rain and the briny scent of churned sea. Waves, once steady and predictable, grew taller, rolling and crashing with increasing power. Even from a distance, the keeper could sense the mood of the storm, his trained eyes reading the sky and water like a slowly unfolding story. Preparation for a storm began long before the first drop of rain fell. The keeper double-checked the lamp and lens, ensuring the flame would burn steadily through the gusts and damp air. He secured spare oil and wicks close at hand, ready for quick adjustments if the flame flickered. Every tool, every rope, every mechanism was inspected carefully. Humor softened the otherwise serious task. "All right, Storm, let's see what you've got. I'm ready," he murmured quietly to no one in particular, a private joke shared with the restless wind. Windows and doors received particular attention. Heavy shutters were closed and latched securely, keeping rain and wind at bay. Loose stones or boards along the walkway were checked and reinforced. Even small gaps in the tower were addressed, preventing the storm from sneaking inside. Each action was slow and deliberate, executed with the understanding that haste could be dangerous. The keeper moved like a calm conductor, orchestrating a performance, ensuring every element of the lighthouse worked in harmony against the fury of the elements. As the first raindrops began to fall, the lamp's golden glow became more vital than ever. The beam cut through the thickening darkness, bouncing off waves and rain, reaching far across the turbulent waters. The keeper watched closely, occasionally adjusting the wick to prevent smoke or uneven burning. Even amid roaring winds and crashing waves, these movements were gentle and deliberate. Every flicker he corrected was a small act of vigilance, a quiet reassurance that sailors far away could navigate safely. The storm outside was dramatic, but the keeper's internal rhythm remained steady. He listened carefully to the wind, the rain, and the waves, interpreting each sound. A sudden rise in wave height, a shift in wind direction, or a crack of distant thunder was noted in his mind, quietly recorded in the rhythm of observation he had practiced for years. Even in chaos, there was order. The lighthouse stood firm. Its mechanisms worked reliably, and he moved with patient, practiced precision. Small maintenance tasks continued even as the storm raged. He might wipe down the lens if raindrops had splashed against it, ensure that pulleys and ropes turned smoothly despite humidity, or adjust the lamp's flame for optimal brightness. Every gesture was deliberate, careful, and attentive. Humor remained a gentle companion. He might mutter to the storm, "You're dramatic tonight, but we'll manage, won't we?" A soft smile accompanying the words. These little jests kept his mind light even in the midst of relentless weather. The keeper also paid attention to the rhythm of the waves. Even powerful, storm-driven seas followed patterns, and understanding them allowed him to anticipate the lighthouse's needs. The rocking of the tower, the spray against the rocks, and the sound of water surging into inlets were all part of a natural language he had learned to read. This constant observation, combined with preparation and calm adjustments, ensured that the lighthouse remained steadfast, its light a reliable guide in the darkness. Evenings during storms often stretched into the late night, with no sense of hurry, but a deep awareness of responsibility. The keeper moved slowly between the lantern room, the stairwell, and observation points around the tower, maintaining the flame and checking mechanisms. His body was engaged, but not frantic. His mind focused, yet relaxed in its rhythm. The storm, though fierce outside, was a backdrop for meditation in motion, a dance of vigilance, attention, and calm endurance. At times, brief moments of wonder punctuated the tension. Lightning flashed across the horizon, illuminating the waves and cliffs in stark, fleeting clarity. Thunder rolled in distant valleys, echoing softly over the water. Rain streaked the windows in shimmering ribbons. These natural displays, while powerful, were observed with calm fascination. The keeper often allowed a soft chuckle or whispered commentary. "Quite the light show tonight, isn't it?" Humor, subtle and gentle, offered both relief and companionship in the solitary night. Throughout the storm, the logbook remained nearby. Though writing was minimal during heavy gusts, he occasionally jotted quick notes, wind direction, wave patterns, and unusual observations. These entries, precise yet simple, were part of the ongoing story of life at the lighthouse. Every storm added to the narrative, a reminder that the keeper's life was a balance of patience, observation, and preparedness, shaped by both calm and turbulence. By the early hours of the night, storms often began to subside. Winds softened, rain lightened, and the sea gradually returned to a steady rhythm. The keeper, patient and enduring, continued his watch, ensuring the lamp burned steadily and the lighthouse remained secure. Each moment of vigilance, every small adjustment had contributed to the steady reliability of the tower. Sailors far away, navigating safely through the storm,
owed their security in part to these quiet, deliberate actions. Even after the storm passed, reflection and observation continued. The sea, glistening under the moon, seemed to calm in gratitude. The wind whispered gently against the tower, and the lighthouse stood tall, steadfast, and patient. The keeper allowed himself a quiet smile, a soft exhalation of satisfaction. The storm, fierce as it had been, had passed, and the lighthouse had fulfilled its purpose, guided by careful hands and a calm, gentle mind. Stormy nights, though challenging, were never rushed or chaotic for the keeper. They were a time of heightened attention, deliberate action, and quiet endurance. Humor, patience, and careful observation transformed potential tension into a meditative rhythm. The lighthouse, the sea, and the keeper existed in harmony, a trio of steadiness amid the unpredictable elements of nature. Every storm strengthened their bond between them, teaching lessons in vigilance, care, and calm resilience. By dawn, the storm would be memory, the sea returning to its gentle rhythm, and the lighthouse ready for a new day. The keeper, exhausted but satisfied, would reflect on the night's vigilance, feeling the quiet pride that came from steady attention, careful preparation, and gentle humor. Stormy nights were part of the life he had chosen, shaping him as much as he shaped the lighthouse. Each challenge met with patience, calm, and a soft smile.
The first light of dawn after a storm carried a special calm, a quiet relief, and a soft sense of renewal. For the lighthouse keeper, mornings following turbulent nights were both comforting and important, a time to observe, assess, and restore order. The sea, though still restless in small waves, reflected the pale light of the rising sun, while the sky slowly brightened from deep indigo to gentle pinks and golds. Everything felt fresher, cleaner, as if the storm had washed away yesterday's tension and left a world ready for gentle attention. The keeper began with a slow survey of the surroundings. From the tower window, he watched waves ripple over rocks, noting any debris carried in by the storm. Driftwood, seaweed, or small stones might have landed near the lighthouse path, and each piece required careful attention. Walking along the shoreline, he picked up and arranged items where necessary, ensuring paths were safe and accessible. The small, deliberate act of tidying the immediate environment offered a comforting sense of control after a night dominated by nature's unpredictability. Next, he checked the tower itself. Storms could be harsh on even the sturdiest structures. He examined the walls for loose stones or cracks, tightened any hinges that had been stressed by gusting wind, and ensured the doors and windows remained secure. Every step was measured, methodical, and deliberate, turning potentially stressful tasks into gentle rituals of care. Humor, soft and private, accompanied these movements. "You and me, tower, we weathered that one together," he whispered, giving the stone wall a small pat, as if it were a companion rather than inanimate stone. The lamp, too, required attention, though the storm had left it largely intact. The keeper carefully inspected the wick and flame, cleaned any water droplets or residue from the lens, and ensured the rotation mechanism moved smoothly. Even after a night of gusting winds and rain, the lamp continued to shine steadily, its golden glow cutting faintly through the soft morning light. The keeper often paused to admire this continuity, finding satisfaction in the quiet endurance of both lamp and lighthouse. It was proof that careful preparation and vigilance paid off. The garden, too, required a gentle check. Rain and wind might have battered delicate plants or scattered soil across paths. The keeper walked slowly among the herbs and flowers, brushing leaves back into place, loosening compacted soil, and smiling at any sprouts that had survived the storm. Humor, soft as ever, surfaced when a particularly mischievous plant seemed to lean in protest against the wind. "You had quite the night, haven't you?" he murmured, adjusting the soil around its roots.
Tending the garden after a storm was not only practical but meditative, a quiet reminder of resilience and care. Breakfast followed the morning inspections, a simple ritual to restore warmth and energy. He often prepared a small pot of tea, the steam rising in delicate curls, accompanied by bread or cheese that had been stored neatly the night before. Sipping slowly, the keeper allowed himself to observe the post-storm scenery. Sunlight sparkling on wet stones, birds beginning to chirp again, and distant sails cautiously appearing on the horizon. Even this small meal became an exercise in mindfulness, a way to appreciate the calm that followed chaos. After breakfast, minor repairs occupied his time. Loose boards and walkways were secured, small leaks patched, and ropes or pulleys adjusted if the storm had strained them. Every movement was careful, precise, and deliberate, turning potentially stressful tasks into gentle rituals of care. Humor, soft and private, accompanied these movements. "You and me, Tower, we weathered that one together," he whispered, giving the stone wall a small pat, as if it were a companion rather than inanimate stone. Morning also offered moments of reflection. The storm's passage highlighted the unpredictable nature of the sea and the quiet importance of the lighthouse keeper's work. Every lamp lit, every adjustment made, and every careful observation ensured that the structure could continue to fulfill its purpose. Humor softened the reflections. He might chuckle softly at how dramatic the previous night had seemed, or whisper encouragement to the plants and lamp alike. Reflection, mingled with gentle amusement, turned ordinary tasks into mindful routines. Birds and wildlife often reappeared quickly after storms, and the keeper took note. Gulls returned to the cliffs, hopping and flapping across wet rocks. Seals occasionally bobbed in calmer waters, glancing toward the lighthouse with curiosity. The keeper observed quietly, understanding that the world around him, though affected by the storm, continued to thrive and adapt. Watching nature's resilience reinforced the calm, patient approach he practiced in every task. By mid-morning, the lighthouse, garden, and surrounding area had regained a sense of normalcy. The tower stood proud and intact, the lamp glowed steadily, and the paths and garden were orderly once more. The keeper paused briefly to take in the scene, inhaling the fresh, salt-tinged air and feeling the steady rhythm of life around him. Every storm left evidence of disruption, but also a sense of achievement and care, the tangible results of patient vigilance and deliberate action. The morning after a storm was also a time for small notes in the logbook. Weather observations, wave heights, wind direction, and minor damage or debris were recorded carefully. These entries were brief but precise, a continuation of the daily routine that linked days and nights, calm and storm, routine and vigilance. Humor occasionally surfaced in shorthand annotations, small personal notes that lightened the otherwise practical record. These entries, though private, captured the essence of life at the lighthouse, patient, attentive, and quietly human. Finally, the keeper allowed a few moments of quiet observation and reflection. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered in the wind-whipped trees, glistening stones, and slightly higher tide. Each detail was noted and appreciated, forming a calm tapestry of experience. The lamp's light, the garden's resilience, the structural integrity of the tower, and the subtle patterns of wildlife all were signs that careful attention and gentle routine could weather even the most unpredictable events. By late morning, the keeper was ready to transition into the normal rhythm of the day, tending the garden, checking the lamp, maintaining the tower, and observing the sea. The storm was a memory now, its legacy quietly embedded in every routine task. Humor, patience, and observation remained central, transforming post-storm work into meditative care. Life at the lighthouse, calm and deliberate, continued steadily, shaped by nature's challenges and the keeper's gentle resilience. In this serene morning, after the storm's dramatic passage, the lighthouse and its keepers stood as symbols of quiet endurance. Every small action, Every careful adjustment and every patient observation contributed to the ongoing rhythm of life by the sea. The storm had passed, but its legacy, the reminder of vigilance, patience, and care, remained, quietly guiding the lighthouse keeper through another day of steady, gentle routine.
As the day gradually leaned toward evening, the lighthouse keeper prepared for one of the most peaceful and satisfying moments of his daily rhythm, sunset reflections and the gentle closing of the day. The world beyond the tower glowed in warm shades of gold, orange, and soft pink, casting a serene light over the waves, cliffs, and garden. This was the time to pause, reflect, and savor the quiet achievements of the day, as well as to prepare the lighthouse and its surroundings for the night ahead. The keeper often began by walking slowly around the tower, observing the coastline bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Waves glimmered and rolled in a soothing rhythm, reflecting the fading sunlight and tiny flashes that seemed to dance across the water. The wind carried a cooler hint of evening, gently tousling his hair and brushing the scent of salt and seaweed across his skin. Every movement and every sensation was noted, consciously or not, as the keeper allowed himself to be fully present in this gentle transition between day and night. Before the lamp required attention for its nightly vigil, he checked the garden one last time. The plants had grown steadily under his care, enduring wind, sun, and even the recent storm. Leaves glistened with residual droplets, petals slightly ruffled yet resilient, and small herbs released their evening fragrance into the salty air. The keeper moved quietly, adjusting soil, brushing leaves, and gently tending the plants. Humor, subtle and comforting, surfaced as he spoke softly to them. "You've made it through another day, haven't you? Not too shabby." Even in solitude, these whispered remarks brought warmth to the quiet evening. The tower itself demanded a careful once-over before darkness fully settled. Doors were checked, hinges oiled if needed, and any minor repairs from the day's work addressed. The spiral stairs were inspected for safety, and the railing polished lightly by hand. Every action was slow, deliberate, and calming, a quiet testament to the care the lighthouse had received throughout the day. Even small moments, like brushing a patch of dust from the lens or tightening a loose screw, became meditative gestures, grounding the keeper in the rhythm of his routine. By now, the sky had deepened, the sun lower, painting long, gentle shadows across the cliffside. The keeper paused, leaning slightly against the tower railing, and allowed himself a soft sigh of contentment. These sunset moments were a time for reflection on the tasks completed, the small challenges overcome, and the quiet satisfaction of maintaining a structure that guided countless sailors safely. Every adjustment, every observation, every tender care for the lighthouse and its surroundings culminated in this steady sense of fulfillment. As evening approached, the lamp required preparation. The wick was trimmed, oil checked, and glass panes polished, all performed with the slow, precise movements the keeper had perfected over years. Humor remained a subtle companion. He might mutter, "Let's put on a good show tonight, shall we?" while adjusting the flame. These small human touches transformed what might seem routine into an intimate, almost ritualistic connection between the keeper and his lighthouse. Lighting the lamp as darkness crept closer marked a quiet transition. The first glow of the flame reflected off the Fresnel lens, sending golden rays far across the water. The keeper watched intently, ensuring the light remained steady, the rotation smooth, and the flame unwavering. The sunset outside cast a gentle gradient of colors behind the lamp's glow, creating a magical interplay of natural and human-made light.
These moments were meditative, almost sacred, a harmonious pause in which the day's work and evening's vigilance met in perfect balance. After the lamp was securely burning, the keeper often spent a few moments simply observing the world around him. Waves rolled in gentle patterns, birds returned to roost, and the sky deepened into purples and indigos. Occasionally, a distant ship's light flickered on the horizon, reminding him of the lives his steady work touched. The connection between lighthouse, keeper, and world felt profound in these moments, a subtle but powerful reminder of purpose and calm responsibility. Dinner, a modest and comforting affair, followed. The keeper often prepared something simple: bread, cheese, and a cup of tea, eating slowly while seated near a window or in a quiet corner of the cottage. The warmth of the meal, the fading sunlight, and the gentle hum of the sea outside created a cocoon of contentment. He allowed himself small reflections, gentle humor, and soft thoughts of the day's successes. Repairs completed, lamp tended, waves observed, and garden nurtured. Even the smallest achievements felt significant in the quiet rhythm of life at the lighthouse. Once the day's tasks were fully concluded, he returned to the tower to make final observations. The rotation of the lens was checked one last time, the flame confirmed steady, and all mechanisms secure. Any notes or observations he had jotted down throughout the day were reviewed briefly, stored for the following morning. The keeper's mind, calm and centered, allowed for a few private musings, gentle jokes, or soft chuckles about minor mishaps, a stubborn hinge, a mischievous gull, or a wayward plant. Humor, like the lamp's glow, added warmth to the solitude. As the sun disappeared entirely behind the horizon, the lighthouse stood illuminated against the darkened sky, its golden light reaching across the water in steady arcs. The keeper paused to watch, appreciating the culmination of hours of attention, patience, and care. The world was quiet, the sea steady, and the lighthouse, a testament to both human diligence and nature's rhythm, shone reliably as a beacon of calm in the approaching night. Finally, he took a slow, deliberate walk around the tower one last time. The paths were clear, the garden secure, and the tower maintained. Each step was a gentle act of closure, a soft ritual signaling that the day was ending with order and intention. Sitting near the railing, he observed the stars emerging in the evening sky, the faint twinkle mirrored by the light reaching across the water. A soft sigh escaped him, a mixture of satisfaction, peace, and gentle pride. The day concluded, not with hurry, noise, or fanfare, but with quiet reflection, subtle humor, and deep contentment. Every action, from morning preparations to evening lamplighting, had contributed to the smooth rhythm of life at the lighthouse. The keeper's day, though solitary, was full of purpose, observation, and gentle meditative practice, intertwined with the natural cycles of sea, sky, and weather. Sunset, a soft and fleeting bridge between day and night, offered the perfect moment to pause, appreciate, and close the day with calm assurance. And so, as the stars fully emerged and the night deepened, the lighthouse continued its silent vigil. The keeper, calm and content, rested his mind, savoring the gentle rhythm of his day, prepared to continue this slow, deliberate routine tomorrow. Life at the lighthouse, shaped by patience, care, humor, and steady observation, was simple yet profound, a reminder that even the quietest lives could carry light far and wide.